Hi, and welcome to our lecture series on learning to love Isaiah. I'm Kerry Muhlestein, and I'm a professor of ancient scripture at BYU, where I teach courses on the Old Testament and Isaiah and other courses, but those are the ones that are relevant to this because I love teaching Isaiah, and I love helping people understand Isaiah. I think there's so much that we can gain from Isaiah if we really come to understand him. So let's look at some of the reasons why we should study Isaiah. The most obvious reason is also the one that probably gives us the most guilt, and that is that it's a commandment from the Savior. We get in 3 Nephi chapter 23, verse 1, where the Savior says, "Yea, a commandment I give unto you, that ye search these things diligently, for great are the words of Isaiah." That's reason enough in and of itself that the Savior commanded us, but he's not the only one. Nephi says, "I, Nephi, write more of the words of Isaiah, for my soul delighteth in his words." That's what I'm hoping can happen as we work together, that you'll not only understand Isaiah, but you'll start to delight in his words. That's not something that everyone feels, but I hope it will be by the time we're done. Nephi also said this, "Now I write some of the words of Isaiah, that whoso of my people shall see these words may lift up their hearts and rejoice for all men." What more could we ask for than to rejoice? And I hope that understanding Isaiah will cause you to rejoice. Now, we know that we should study Isaiah, and we want to delight in it and rejoice in it, but often we know those things, and yet when we study, it's hard, and we struggle, and we start to feel a little bit of guilt, and that's what we're here to relieve today and in this series of lectures. But we have to ask ourselves, is it going to be easy? And the answer is no, it's going to require some effort. Even in ancient times, it wasn't easy. We get this from the book of Acts. "Philip ran thither to him," this eunuch that he'd seen, "and heard him read the prophet Esaias," which is Isaiah, and said, "Understandest thou what thou readest?" And he said, "How can I, except some man should guide me?" And he desired Philip that he would come up and sit with him. So you get the idea. Even in ancient times, someone was saying, I need someone to help me understand this. I need a guide to help me understand this. We also get Nephi saying this, "I, Nephi, do speak somewhat concerning the words which I have written, which have been spoken by the mouth of Isaiah. For behold, Isaiah spake many things which were hard for many of my people to understand." So he knows that this can be difficult as well. So we ask ourselves, what are the answers? How can we come to understand Isaiah better? And Nephi goes on to give us many keys. As he says that it's hard for his people to understand, he then explains why, and that gives us the clues as to what we need to do to be able to understand Isaiah. He says, "For they know not concerning the manner of prophesying among the Jews." So there's something about the manner of prophesying, if you know the manner of prophesying among the Jews, that will help you understand Isaiah. We get this elsewhere in Nephi. He says, "There is none other people that understand the things which were spoken unto the Jews like unto them, save it be that they are taught after the manner of the things of the Jews." So the manner of prophesying and the manner of the things among the Jews are keys. But what is the manner of prophesying among the Jews? And there are a number of things. Some of it is their particular poetic element and style. They had a different way of writing that as we catch on to that, it will help us. They use symbolism a tremendous amount. One of the things that's difficult for people is that Isaiah in particular will prophesy in a way that his prophecies are fulfilled in multiple time periods. So if we can start to understand how to do that, it will help us. He uses what we call, as Hebraists, we call it prophetic perfect, but prophetic past tense is how I think we can best understand it. And the idea is that prophets often speak of things that are in the future as if they'd already happened. They've become so real to them in vision that as they describe them, they talk about them past tense, even though they haven't happened yet, and that can be a little confusing for us, but as we get used to it, it's not so hard. So we're not going to need to spend a lot of time on that one. We'll spend time on all of the things above that, the poetry, the symbolism, and the multiple fulfillments. With prophetic past tense, you just kind of have to make a shift in your mind and say, okay, that may not have happened yet in his day, but I understand that it's so real for him that he talks about it as if it has happened. Another one that we don't need to spend a lot of time on, but that we can just kind of start to think about, is when the prophets say, "Thus saith the Lord," or they'll say that and they'll speak as if they were God, and then they'll flip out of that and they'll speak as if they're themselves, and then they go back into speaking as if they were God, and they kind of come in and out of that. We actually see the same thing in the Book of Mormon, where Mormon will be quoting Alma, and then you say Mormon, you'll see Mormon say something of his own, and then he goes back into quoting Alma, and we adjust to it fairly well there, and we can adjust to it in Isaiah as well, and just see when sometimes he's speaking for the Lord, now he's speaking as if he's himself, now he's speaking as if he's the Lord. You can adjust for that fairly well, but it's those earlier things that we'll focus on that can help you the most. Let's continue to look at what Nephi told us would help. So he said, my soul delighteth in the words of Isaiah, for I came out from Jerusalem. So before we go on and read the rest of the verse, let's just say that something about geography and topography is what he's suggesting will help us understand Isaiah. So we're going to look at that just a little bit, and I'll give you some tools that will help you do that on your own. He also says, mine eyes hath beheld the things of the Jews. So he's talked about the manner of prophesying of the prophets and the things of the prophets. Now we've got the things of the Jews. That's customs and culture. Again, we'll go through some examples of that, and I'll also give you some tools to help you just get to be able to understand that on your own. Then he says, and I know that the Jews do understand the things of the prophets. So again, we've got the things of the prophets, or the manner of the prophets, and those are the things we've already talked about that we'll work on together. So those are a lot of things that can help us understand Isaiah. Nephi goes on to say, but behold, I myself have dwelt at Jerusalem, therefore I know concerning the regions round about. So again, geography and topography are important. And then he says, I've made mention unto my children concerning the judgments of God, which hath come to pass among the Jews, unto my children, according to all that which Isaiah hath spoken, and I do not write them. There are two things caught up in that idea of the judgments of God which have come to pass among the Jews. One of those is just knowing the history of what God did with ancient Israel. And when Nephi says Jews, he sometimes means just the people from the kingdom of Judah. He doesn't mean just the tribe of Judah. He means the kingdom of Judah. But sometimes he just talks about all Israel. And in this case, I'd say it's all Israel. There isn't a northern kingdom anymore by the time Nephi's writing. So when he thinks of Israel, he just thinks of the kingdom of Judah. But really, if we know God's history, what he does with ancient Israel and how he deals with them, that will help us understand Isaiah. Further, the judgments and the way God interacts with Israel is determined by the covenant and the stipulations of the covenant and the way that they keep or don't keep the covenant. So one of the great keys to understanding Isaiah is to know something of the history. You don't need to know a detailed history. Really, some just brief history will help us. And understand the covenant and God's interactions within that covenant with his people. So if we understand those things, that can help us a lot as we try to understand Isaiah. So let's review this list. These are the things that Nephi said would help us understand Isaiah. The manner of prophesying of the Jews, geography and topography, customs and culture, and history and covenant. And so those are the things that we are going to spend our time on to help you understand and love Isaiah. We'll talk about the manner of prophesying in this lecture a little bit, and a lot in lectures 2 and 3. We're going to talk about geography and topography in this lecture. We're going to talk about customs and culture a little bit in this lecture, but quite a bit in lecture 2. And history and covenant we'll cover in lectures 3 and 4. So between all 4 lectures, we're really going to help you do all the things that Nephi has told us will help us understand Isaiah. So let's look out at some general strategies. We just want to start by thinking of some general things that will help us understand Isaiah. The first of these is to just know some of the background, the historical background, the cultural background, and so on. Those are the things we were just talking about. I have a passion for making the scriptures become real to people. I've just found that when the scriptures are real to you, that you can apply them better to your life. When you can picture them, and when the people in them seem real, and you know you're a real person and they're a real person, you identify with them, and you can apply them better to your life. So we're going to try and make these things become real to you by giving you background and history. All right, just some general history. So those are some general strategies that if you know those, they will apply to everything we do. So let's start out with just a little bit of that background. All right, these are some facts about Isaiah that will help you understand the book of Isaiah. First of all, just his name, Yeshayahu, which means Jehovah saves. It's what we call theophoric. It has the name of God. It's theo, right? That's God. It has the name of God in it. It's a shortened version, Yahoo. In fact, in the scriptures, especially in the Old Testament, you'll find a lot of names that are theophoric. Typically, if you have names ending in Yah or that's short for Yahoo, which is short for Jehovah. And so this is one of those names that has Jehovah in it. And it literally means Jehovah saves, which is actually the theme of the book of Isaiah. His parents were prophetic as they named him. It's really the theme of Isaiah that Jehovah will save. So that's worth knowing and understanding. We also should know just a little bit about him. He lives in Judah, but he prophesies to Israel until they're destroyed, and he prophesies to all nations. And that makes it clear that Jehovah is the God of all the earth. Now, all of the cultures around them are polytheistic, and they think of there being many gods, but their God, their local God is their God. Someone else has their own God, and that's their God, and everyone has their own God. Whereas Isaiah is going to say, no, Jehovah is the God of everybody, of all the earth. So I'll prophesy to my people. I'll prophesy to my cousins, the tribes of Israel. I'm going to prophesy to everybody because Jehovah is all of your God. And that's important and powerful. He's born roughly 760 BC. We don't know exactly when, and these dates are rough. He receives his call somewhere around 740, so when he's fairly young. He traditionally dies around 690. Tradition holds that he was running away from Manasseh, King Manasseh, Hezekiah's son, who wanted to kill him, and he hid in a hollowed-out tree, and so Manasseh sawed the tree in half. Sawing him in half. We don't know if that's true or not, but that's a tradition. In any case, he dies during Manasseh's days. So he lives for a long time. He serves under kings Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah, and Manasseh. And you should know that Azariah is another name for Uzziah, just like William and Bill are the same name. Uzziah and Azariah are the same person. So when you're reading, say, 2 Kings 15, and you're reading about Azariah, then Uzziah, that's the same person, and those are the earliest days of Isaiah's ministry. All right. Now, tradition holds that he's Hezekiah's father-in-law and he's Uzziah's cousin. We don't know if that's true, but there are some things that make sense about it. He seems to have access to royalty. He's certainly elite and sophisticated and educated, which is our next point. He's really aristocratic and educated, unlike Amos, who says he's working in the fields, and some prophets are following the sheep, some are working in trees, and so on. Isaiah is very, very educated and seems to be part of that royal court. So he might be cousin to Uzziah, which would mean he's a descendant of David. It may be that his daughter marries Hezekiah, and that might be why Hezekiah listens to him so much. But in the end, we don't know those things. They're traditions, but there are indications of the fact that Isaiah has access to that royal court. Let's just look at this chart that I've created, and the dates are very rough. Let's be clear about that, but that gives you an idea of Isaiah's ministry. So this is Isaiah's ministry. His ministry spans all these years. Over on the left-hand side, you can see the kings of Assyria, and he ministers through the reigns of a number of kings of Assyria. He ministers through all of the last kings of Israel, and he ministers through the reigns of a number of kings of Judah. So you see that he affects a number of kings and prophesies for a very long time. He has contemporaries. We're not 100% sure, but it seems like Amos may overlap with him just a little bit as he's beginning his ministry. Almost certainly he's familiar with Amos and is shaped and influenced by Amos as he's very young. Perhaps Jonah or Joel, we don't know exactly when they prophesy, but perhaps they are prophesying about when he begins. Certainly, Hosea and Micah are contemporary with Isaiah. This is not surprising. This is when the kingdoms of Israel and Judah are on the brink of destruction, and God is trying to warn them, and so he sends a number of prophets. Some of the more powerful prophets that we know of, the more effective prophets that we know of, are prophesying during this time period. And to some degree, they're not that effective because Israel is destroyed and scattered. But they gave the warning that God wanted them to give, just like Mormon and Moroni give the Nephites the warning that God wanted them to receive, so that they wouldn't be destroyed without having that warning. Isaiah's ministry is long and influential, is really what we're trying to get at with this chart. So, those are some just background general strategies. Let's talk about another general strategy, which is to just be willing to pay a price to understand Isaiah. I would put it this way. We just need to slow down because Isaiah is ahead. So often we've been reading narratives, and we read narratives quickly, and then we get to the prophetic books, and Isaiah is the first of those. And we get to Isaiah, and we don't feel like slowing down. We want to read just as quickly, but that won't work. Isaiah wrote powerfully and densely, and you're just going to have to slow down, just like if you're reading comic books or even a page-turner mystery novel as opposed to a general conference talk. One just requires you to stop and think more than the other. And that's what we need to do with Isaiah. We just need to slow down. There's a famous saying that has been said by a number of people in a number of different ways, and the idea is that nature reserves its greatest beauties for those who are willing to pay the price to get there. Meaning usually you have to go on hikes to get, these are some pictures I took after some fairly lengthy hikes to get to some of the more beautiful places that are in the area around me. And it's just true, not only of nature, but of the things of God. Those things that are worth the most are reserved for those who are willing to put in the effort to obtain them. And Isaiah is one of those. We have to be willing to pay a bit of a price if we're going to understand Isaiah by slowing down and saying, I'm going to think about this. I'm going to work my way through the things that Isaiah is teaching. I'm going to pray. I'm going to put some effort in, and then we can get a lot out of it. So my suggestion would be that it's better to study 5 chapters of Isaiah really well than 10 poorly. So if you have a timeline that you're working on, you might have to skip some. If you just are going to study Isaiah for however long it takes, then take a long time and pay the price and understand Isaiah as well as you can. One of these other general strategies is to understand symbolism. And now we get into this manner of prophesying of the Jews, although it's a manner of prophesying among many cultures. Symbols are incredibly important as we teach. In fact, Elder Orson F. Whitney said that God teaches using symbols. It is his favorite method of teaching. And I believe that's true. And there are a number of reasons why symbols are so effective. God uses them. His prophets use them. Jesus uses them. Parables are extended symbols. We use them in the temple. We use them in all of our ordinances. God uses these symbols partially because they're more memorable. You remember a symbol better than just a phrase. Partially because they are vivid and they affect us more deeply. Partially because they have the ability to reveal layers of meaning. So a symbol may mean something to you today, and then 10 years from now it'll mean something else to you, and then when some other circumstances of life have come up or you have different needs, it will reveal another meaning to you. They have layers of meaning. This is part of why we struggle as a people with symbols. We're becoming less and less symbol-oriented over time because we're becoming more and more legalistic. We want A to mean this one thing and nothing else. It's difficult when we are going to go to court or honor a contract or something. If something can be interpreted in more than one way, that's a problem for us. So we try to get away from things that can be interpreted in more than one way. But symbols are intended to be interpreted in a number of ways, and we need to not only become comfortable with that, but become good at it. To become very good at looking for the various layers of meaning in symbols. And Isaiah often intended many meanings with his symbols. And I think the Lord sometimes intends for us to get out of it even more than Isaiah had intended. Part of the problem, though, is that Isaiah uses a lot of symbols that we're not necessarily familiar with because of the gap in time and culture. So let me just give you an example of this. We're going to read a quote from Elder Maxwell. I think Elder Maxwell is the closest thing to Isaiah we've had in our generation. He was masterful with symbols and with his writing style. So we're going to read a quote from Elder Maxwell that you'll just intuitively understand. He said, "A basic cause of murmuring is that too many of us seem to expect that life will flow ever smoothly. featuring an unbroken chain of green lights with empty parking places just in front of our destinations. Now, we all get that. We naturally intuit and understand green lights. Yep, I understand what he means. Parking spaces. Yep, I get what he means. Because this is something we experience every day. I would guess people in Isaiah's day would look at this and have no idea what we're talking about. I would also guess that in 200 years, someone would look at this and say, green lights? Why do they need green lights? What does that mean? But for us, because we experience it, it's natural. We have to get ourselves to where Isaiah's symbols become more natural, or we have to be willing to pay a price to go and look into them. So it's becoming more difficult because Isaiah uses a lot of agricultural symbols, and in our day, fewer and fewer of us are involved with anything agricultural. We don't thresh, we don't sow, we don't do a lot of things that Isaiah refers to when he uses these agricultural symbols, or symbols from the way they dress and the way they act. Those are just things that are foreign to us, and we don't understand them, so we're going to have to do some work. We're going to have to unpack these symbols, right? So that's actually a symbol I'm using to help you understand what to do with symbols. We're going to have to unpack the symbols that we encounter as we are studying Isaiah. And so I'm going to give you a couple of steps that I think we need to go through if we're going to really unpack and then gain something from Isaiah's symbols. And I find that often we skip through or go really quickly through the first steps, and that limits our ability to do those later steps that we're often jumping to. So let's look at the first step. The first step is to learn the literal symbol. Whatever it is that Isaiah is talking about, you have to actually learn about that thing. So let me give you an example. We have from Isaiah chapter 42, Isaiah saying, "A bruised reed shall he not break, and the smoking flax shall he not quench. He shall bring forth judgment unto truth." Now our temptation is to just either say, okay, I don't know what he's talking about with reeds and flax, moving on, or to say, okay, what does he mean? How would a bruised reed and a smoking flax apply to me? Without going through the first step, which is to say, what is meant by a reed? What kind of reeds is he talking about? Most of the reeds would be the kinds of reeds that grow along the Jordan River or the Nile River. These are pictures of reeds in the Nile and so on. So we can understand and learn a little bit about what the reeds are, but then we have to ask ourselves, well, how did they use reeds? And in Isaiah's day, and particularly for someone like Isaiah, the most common way they would use a reed is as a writing instrument. They did use them for fences and things like that, and the symbol might work that way. But we have to look at both of these and try and figure out what is meant by that. So if we have a bruised reed, it's one that has become broken or is not stiff anymore, then it's not suitable for writing anymore, or it's not suitable for a fence or something along those lines. A hedge is maybe a better way of putting that. It's not suitable for it anymore, so typically we would throw those away. All right. What about flax? What's meant by flax? Well, we have to look into it. Flax is a plant that grows. You can use it for a number of things. Flax seeds, we eat flax seeds, people will eat them. But the most common thing that flax is used for is they would use the fibers to make linen, and they make clothing out of linen. All right, so this is a tunic made largely of linen from my own excavation, and that's the most common way that flax is used. But that's probably not exactly what Isaiah is referring to, because he talks about a smoking flax. So then you have to start to look into what is a smoking flax. And let me just say, all of these things you can learn online. We live in a day where information is so easily available. Just get online and start learning about these things. Some sources are not super reliable, but if you find 3 or 5 sources that are saying the same thing, then you're probably in safe territory, all right? So if you say, okay, how flax might be used that it would smoke, then you learn, we take we make like those linen fibers and weave them together to make a wick for their lamp. And so that's worth understanding, that you have these wicks that are made of flax, and they burn, but when they burn quite well without smoke coming until they've been about used up. And you can tell when the wick is about used up, because then it starts to smoke. And you get a lot of smoke coming off of it. And that's when you're going to throw it away. All right, so that's the literal symbol. That's what this literally is about. So now we can move to step 2 finally. What's the symbolic meaning? So we can start to ask ourselves, what is he doing if he is throwing away this bruised reed or throwing away this smoking flax? Then we can say, that symbolically, if you are tossing things, then you are saying, this is of no use to me anymore, and I don't want it. But if I'm going to look for a symbolic meaning behind the fact that he doesn't do that, it means whoever is being spoken of here isn't willing to just discard things when they don't seem to be useful anymore. There's some kind of important symbolism in there. Looking for what the various contexts of the symbol are will help us then apply it better. So we should look for how might it be applied. This is the next step. How might it be applied in Isaiah's day? How might it be applied in your life? So let's look at Isaiah's day. He says, "Behold, my servant whom I uphold, mine elect in whom my soul delighteth. I have put my spirit upon him. He'll bring forth judgment of the Gentiles." That's the person who, in verse 3, will not break a bruised reed and not quench a smoking flax. All right, so who is the servant? We have to ask ourselves. Well, one meaning of the servant is Christ. So now we can start to see the symbolism. Christ doesn't say, well, you're a bruised reed. You're a smoking flax. You don't seem to be very useful anymore. I am getting rid of you. I'm not going to throw you away. I'm not going to quench you. The Savior will not say that. He will continue to work with us, even if we're bruised or smoking, even if it seems like we're used up and we're spent. The Savior will continue to work with us. That's some great symbolism. Some other symbolism, though, is that the servant, the person that Isaiah identifies as the servant, is the house of Israel. So the house of Israel won't just discard people because they are broken or bruised reeds and smoking flaxes. Now we can take it the next step and ask how these things might apply to you. As an Israelite individual, do you sometimes say, that person just really isn't helpful, I'm not going to work with them anymore? Do you give up on the people you minister to? Do you not recommend people for callings or try and get people involved that just don't seem to be that reliable or that helpful? Do you just give up on them and discard them because they're a bruised reed and a smoking flax? Or do we still work with them? Do we find ways to work with them? So those are just some possible symbols from the phrase about not getting rid of the bruised reed and the broken flax. And you can see how we went through and looked at the literal symbol, looked at the symbolic meanings, the context, and then we apply those to our own lives. That third step is usually where we jump, but we do better if we've done the first two steps first. Let's use look at another example of some symbols that we can learn about. And again, you can just do this online. Just get online and learn about these things. So this is a very long set of verses. We won't read all of it right now, but I want you to notice that he's talking about a plowman. And verse 25, this plowman, doth he not cast abroad the fitches, and scatter the cummin, and cast in the principal wheat, and the appointed barley, and the rye in their place? So he's talking about how to plant a bunch of different kinds of plants. And our tendency is to be a bunch of plants, don't know what he's talking about, move on. But we can stop and learn about the literal symbol. He's also going to, in those later verses, in verse 27 and 28, say that they're threshed differently. Fitches are not threshed. They're threshed in one way, not in another way. The cartwheel's not turned upon them. They're threshed with the staff and cummin with the rod. And the bread corn is bruised with the threshing and so on. So corn is the King James name or word for grain. So think grain that you could use to make bread. It is bruised, and they'll beat it up as they thresh. So that's all very interesting, but what in the world is he talking about? Well, we're going to have to look into the literal symbols. So I just got online and looked, what are fitches? Well, they're black cummin. All right, that's good. So we've got cummin, which is cummin, different kinds of cummin, all right, or cummin, same thing. So you've got different kinds, and apparently they are cast abroad or scattered. And so I just get online and look. I'm not someone who's an expert in this, but I get online and look, and it turns out that when you plant fitches or cummin, you just break the ground up in general, not in rows. You break it up in general so it's soft everywhere, and you just scatter them because they grow best when they grow in clumps. And so you scatter them so you'll get a clump falling here and a clump falling here and a clump falling here, 3 or 4 or 10 seeds all right by each other, and that's how they grow best. So you just scatter them. That's how you plant them. But you cast in the principal wheat and the appointed barley and the rye in their places. We know what wheat, barley, and rye are. And we see that they're put in their place. Well, they are planted differently. You make rows, and then you carefully plant each kernel so far from the kernel before and after it, carefully distanced apart. That's how they will grow best. So he seems, now that we've learned that, we can say, okay, he seems to be focusing on different plants are planted differently according to how they grow and what their agricultural needs are, right? So now we go down to this part about threshing. Fitches are threshed one way, and corn is threshed another way. So we can ask ourselves, what might that mean? So I just got online and looked, and it turns out fitches, you have to gently, they're little teeny seeds, and you get them, and by hand you just break them out, or you can use little teeny things to break them up, but you do it gently, or that you just ruin them and lose them. So you gently break them up and collect all the little seeds. Whereas wheat and barley, you use a threshing sledge. You get this big sledge, you put rocks in it, then you get someone heavy on it, you put the wheat on a stone floor, and then you run over it with this sled with rocks in it, and you just break them up. You beat them to pieces, literally, and that brings out the kernels for you. So now we see that what he's saying is that some plants are planted one way and others another way, and some plants are threshed one way and others another way. That there are different ways of doing things for different plants. Now that we know the literal meaning, we can start to look at the symbolism, all right? But as we do that, as I've said, we should look at the context. And it's so easy to just look at those last verses out of context, but we should look at the verses that precede them to see if they help us understand it. So we go to the earlier on in the chapter, and we see some verses. We're going to see some verses that we're used to. We've seen a lot. Whom shall he, there are different people that this he can be, whom shall he teach knowledge, and whom shall he make to understand doctrine? Them that are weaned from the milk and drawn from the breast. So there's some more symbols we could get into, but I think we get those symbols when you are done drinking liquids and you can start on solids. When a baby's able to start on solids, they're progressing, right? So we go from that, who can understand doctrine, people who are ready to progress from the simplest to a more complex thing. And why? Well, precept must be upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line upon line, here a little and there a little. Now we get this other interesting verse. For with stammering lips and another tongue, so another tongue is like another language, right? Will he speak to this people? That's not what we expect. Wait a minute. I thought he was going to teach us precept upon precept, line upon line, but now it's telling us that he's going to talk in a way that seems like he's a stammerer or he speaks in a foreign tongue. That's tricky to understand. Now, I do want to add, as we're going through all of this, and I'm talking about things you can look up and learn online, and you certainly can, and it will take a lot of effort, and I think everyone should do at least a little bit of that, but you can also turn to a number of commentaries. There are lots of good commentaries, both by members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and by others. There are lots of commentaries that can do a lot of this work for you, so you don't have to get overwhelmed with spending all of your time on doing that. I think you become better if you can do some of it on your own, and you should do a little bit on your own, but when it just seems complex, turn to a commentary, and that will save you some time, all right? So the reason that a lot of these symbols I've really gotten into is when I was writing my own commentary, and you're forced then to get into it, but then the heavy lifting's been done for you, and you can take advantage of someone else who's done it. So we go back to these verses with understanding knowledge and so on, and I want us to look at the context and look at the verses that are even before this. So now you see what we're doing. We have looked at verses at the end of chapter 28, and we said to understand that we need to look at verses before that. Oh, well, they're a little hard to understand. Let's look at the verses before that. So let's look at these verses, starting in verse 7. But they also have erred through wine. It's talking about the people who should be leading Judah, priests and princes and leaders of Judah. They have erred through wine, and through strong drink are out of the way. The priest and the prophet have erred through strong drink. They are swallowed up out of wine. They are out of the way through strong drink. They err in vision. They stumble in judgment. So he's comparing them to drunkards. He's saying, I think, that they are literally drunk, but also that they are spiritually drunk. He continues with that imagery pretty graphically. For all tables are full of vomit and filthiness, so there is no place that is clean. You get the idea. When people get too drunk, they throw up. And no one wants to be around that when people are just spewing everywhere because of how drunk they've become. But that's what is seemingly literally happening with Judah's leaders, but also figuratively or symbolically happening as they spew spiritual and intellectual vomit because they're drunk on the wrong ideas of the world. They're drunk on worldly ideas. That's the context beforehand, before we get to, so who is he, God, his prophets, and so on, going to teach knowledge? Well, that's going to be difficult. It's probably not going to be to those who are spewing forth vomit and are drunk spiritually and literally. All right? But that may be why it seems to them that God and his prophets are teaching with a stammering lip and a foreign tongue. It's because they're drunk. They're drunk on the ideas of the world, and the things of God can't be understood by the things of the world. In fact, Paul tells us that the things of God are only understood by those who have the Spirit of God with them. You have to be godly to understand the things of God. If you are not, then the things that you hear that are godly will sound like gibberish to you, because you're spiritually drunk and full of spiritual vomit, right? Now, this can help, we can understand this if we understand what it really says in Hebrew. And again, you're probably going to have to turn to commentaries to really learn this. But in Hebrew, Isaiah is not using real words. The words we translate when we say precept upon precept, line upon line, are not real words. He's using partial words. They're words that are related to the word for line is the word that's related to stretching out a line to measure things. It's not the full word, but it's a root, a part of that word, where you stretch a line out to measure something. The word for precept is a word that comes from commands, all right, and the commandments of the law. And so, but he uses only partial words, and this is what it sounds like. It's kav lakav, tzav latzav, tzav latzav. All right, that sounds like gibberish, doesn't it? If we're going to do kind of an approximation of this in English, it would be like ein, sept, sept, instead of line upon line, precept upon precept, precept upon precept. Actually, it would be reversed. Sept, ein. We get that he's kind of talking about those things, but not in a way that fully makes sense. It sounds like gibberish. He is actually making it sound like gibberish because he knows that the things of God will sound like gibberish to those who spew forth physical and spiritual vomit, right? And so as we look at that context, we come to understand that he is teaching us that for those who are prepared, the things of God will be taught to them just line upon line, precept upon precept. But for those who are not prepared, it's gibberish. It makes no sense at all. So now let's keep moving in chapter 28 and look at the verses right after this. So the people to whom this is gibberish says, to whom he said, this is the rest wherewith ye may cause the weary to rest, and this is the refreshing. Yet they would not hear. All right, that's a key. But the word of the Lord was unto them precept upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, here a little and there a little, that they might go and fall away backwards and be broken and snared and taken. All right, so you get the idea. Those to whom this sounds just like kav, tzav, who it just sounds like gibberish because they're full of spiritual drunkenness, when they hear the word of God, are going to fall away and be snared and taken because it makes no sense to them because they're so full of the ideas of the world. They're drunk on the ideas of the world. But to those who actually are prepared and learn from God, they get precept upon precept and line upon line, and they'll be able to progress. All right. Now, this is powerful imagery. And when we compare this with the teachings about the fitches and the barley and rye that come right after that, we get a bigger picture. Isaiah is painting a picture with his words. He does this. He loves to paint a picture with his words and to get us to feel something. So the imagery he gets us to feel is that people who listen to the world and are full of the ideas of the world are spiritual drunkards who stagger and spew vomit on you. And you're supposed to feel how disgusting that is so that you don't want to partake of their vomit and get thrown up on. So this is one of the things we need to do with Isaiah's imagery. When he uses these symbols, he uses his words and these symbols to paint a picture. The picture is designed to help you feel something. And one of the questions you need to ask yourself is, what does Isaiah want me to feel? So right now we're getting the idea he wants me to feel how disgusting and how silly the people are that are full of the ideas of the world and keep spewing it out upon us. So that's the first question, is ask, what does he want me to feel with the imagery? But the second question you need to ask is, why? What does he want to evoke within me? What reaction does he want to evoke within me because of what I feel? And I think in this case, what he wants to evoke in you is the idea that you want to stay away from the ideas of the world and instead turn to the ideas of God. And if you turn to the ideas of God, then line upon line, precept upon precept, he will teach you. And we'll all learn at our own speed and our own pace. Some of us are like Fitches and Cumum, and he'll have to just plant us very gently and thresh us very gently and so on. And some of us are like barley and rye, where he'll plant us in another way and he can quickly thresh us and so on. But the point is, he will work with each of us in the way that we need to be worked with, at the speed we need to be worked with, to bring us to truth and light. That's a beautiful idea. To avoid the filth of the world and to come to God. It doesn't matter where you are. You don't have to feel bad wherever you are spiritually. Just come to God where you are and accept the way that he will work with you, and he will gently fill you with light and truth rather than with vomit. That's a powerful image and a powerful lesson that we can get when we'll stop and look at the symbols, turn it into imagery, feel the feelings, ask what it should evoke in us, and then learn the lesson. That's a great plan for learning Isaiah. It's powerful stuff. Let's look at a couple of other examples of how we can unpack symbols and feel the imagery that Isaiah wants us to feel. So we're going to look at Isaiah chapter 15, and we're not going to read this whole thing, but there's a lot going on in here. We've got the burden of Moab. So this is a prophecy he sees about the destruction of Moab. And you see in verse 2, in verse 1 and 2, there are lots of places mentioned, right? In one night is probably a better translation, but something about it. In a night, Ar is laid waste, and Bayith and Dibon and Madaba and Nebo and all sorts of places are going to be destroyed. We're going to look at, in a way, at all of that, but we're going to focus on this last verse. Heshbon shall cry, and Elaleah, and their voice shall be heard even unto Yahaz. Okay? So, let me talk to you about, as we want to unpack these symbols, about what I think is a really valuable resource. Okay? And we want to unpack the places. Often we read places, we don't know where they are, we just skip it. But Isaiah is using these places for a reason, and he's trying to teach us something. So there's a valuable tool. You go to scriptures.byu.edu. That's scriptures.byu.edu. And then you do a slash, and it's MapScript, all one word. It's not script with the T on the end, no T on the end. MapScript. So scriptures.byu.edu/MapScript. And when you go there, you'll be able to see on the left-hand side column scriptures, and you just choose Isaiah, and in this place you choose Isaiah chapter 15. And when you do that, on the right-hand side, a column, or the Google Earth will populate where all of these places are. And so you can see all of these places have these red balloons that tell you they've been named in the scriptures, in that chapter that's right next to you. Now, sometimes we don't know exactly where a place is, and the best guess is made. So, for example, I think this place up here, I don't think that's actually where that is. We don't know for sure where it is. I think it's actually down south, further down here. But most of these we know right where they are. And suddenly you get an idea of what Isaiah is teaching you. He's telling you that this is the area of Moab, and all throughout Moab we see red dots. He's just named every place in Moab. That's part of the imagery he's trying to create for you. He's just named someplace all over Moab. In other words, he wants you to feel all of Moab experience this destruction. Everywhere. All right, so you'll have to choose wherever you live to recreate that for yourself. Choose a city or a county maybe, and then just name all the cities in that county. And suddenly you say, oh, they destroyed the whole county. All right, or whatever the geographic breakdowns are in wherever you live. All right, now there's that reference for you, by the way, up at the top. Scriptures.byu.edu/MapScript is the reference for you. Now we're going to focus on that last verse I talked about that had Heshbon and Yahaz in it. We're going to talk about those because remember the howlings of Heshbon were heard in Yahaz. So we just need to find out where is that. So we go to Wikipedia and we learn that Heshbon is southwest of Ammon, about 5 kilometers, or it's about 9 kilometers, and it's about 5.6 miles to the north of Madaba. All right. Well, those are places you can find on a modern map. I also look up Yahaz, and I find out it's about 5 miles south of a particular point. So then I just go to Google, or you could go to any mapping feature, and you don't have to go to Wikipedia. Whatever works for you. I'm not trying to sell any of these things. Just whatever works for you. I just put in how far it would be from Madaba down to Dibon, and knowing that Heshbon is about 5 miles north of Madaba and Yahaz is about 5 miles south of Dibon. And so now I know that it's roughly 30 miles between the two. So now I'm trying to get that imagery, right? 30 miles between them. And so just as an example, one of the first times I did this little lecture, I did it for the missionaries in the Layton mission. So I just plotted for them what is 30 miles away from Layton. Well, it's Murray. All right. So now you should ask yourself, is it reasonable that they would hear you howling 30 miles away? If you're in Murray, do you really hear them howling in Layton? No, that's exaggeration, right? Isaiah is using a poetic device, hyperbole or exaggeration, to help you feel how destitute they are in Heshbon because of this destruction. It affects them so much that they are howling in emotional pain so loudly it can be heard 30 miles away. Symbolically, right? He wants you to feel how terrible this is. Why? Because he wants to evoke a reaction in you. What reaction? He wants you to want to avoid that in your own life. And how do we avoid it? We keep the covenants. We listen to the prophets when they warn us, and we keep the covenants. Right? That's what he's trying to evoke in us. So, again, you can get a commentary, and it will help you with any of these things if you don't want to go through the work on your own, but it's something that you can do on your own just by putting these things in. All right? So, as I said, ask yourself, how does it make you feel? What is Isaiah trying to accomplish with this? These are some valuable tools as we try to understand Isaiah. So, for today, remember, we want to understand background. We want to understand symbolism. We want to take that symbolism, unpack it, and unpack it carefully and well, and then try to apply it to our lives, try to feel the imagery that he's painting, and then ask ourselves, why does he want us to feel that way? What is he trying to accomplish with it? And those are some great tools that can help you understand Isaiah. Thank you very much.